Hi everybody, if everyone could sit down now, we need to get going. It's 2 o'clock, we've got lots to get through. We've worked hard for a packed program. Everyone in.
Yes.
And we've got 100 people we think are waiting for us online. This is so exciting. Welcome to you all. We're sorry you're not with us, but we're having a really great party here and it's quite difficult to break up the conversation. So trying to do that and trying to kick off on time.
Everyone is in.
So we turn the light off.
Should we have the light? Yeah. I don't know how to.
I can ask.
Let me. Okay. Shall we start?
Yeah.
Okay. Good afternoon. I think we are all in. Welcome to everyone. Thank you for coming to our meeting. And let me thank also people who are online, who are more than 150. Thank you to our speakers, who are, of course, dermatologists working in resource-poor countries. My name is Federica Dassoni. I'm from Italy, and in the last almost 3 years, I had the pleasure to be part of the board of the Tropical Dermatology Task Force of the EDB. I was co-chairing together with Rosemarie Moser from Austria. Unfortunately, Rosemarie today could not come, so we send her our greetings, and together with Andreas Montag from Hamburg. Andreas is now officially the chair of the Tropical Dermatology Task Force. He's working in Hamburg in his private practice since more than 20 years, and before that he was working in the German army. He's our expert in poisonous plants and poisonous animals, and today he's also going to give us a lecture because unfortunately Dr. Friederike Hauer got sick and he couldn't be here. So there is a small change in the program. Then I give him the word. Thank you very much, Andreas.
Thank you, Federica. So, dear colleagues, the first person I would have liked to welcome here is the Honorable President of the ILDS, Professor Lim, but he is on his way. So we wait a little. And so I have the privilege also to welcome the Honorable President of the ISDD, Professor Elsner, and dear board members, representatives, staff members of ILDS, IFD, ISDD, and GLODAM, dear fellow board members of EADB Task Force for Tropical Dermatology, honorable representatives, heads, or representatives of so many dermatological departments in and outside Germany, dear colleagues and friends sitting here in our auditorium or being connected online from various countries and continents worldwide, including a big fan community from Sri Lanka and other parts of Southeast Asia to support our first speaker, Subani Perera. On behalf of our EADB Task Force for Tropical Dermatology, together with my wonderful co-chair Federica and with our former chair in absence, Rosemarie Moser, accomplished by the great support of Colette van Hees, Claire Fuller, and Markus Staring, and on behalf of GLODAM, represented by Dr. Claire Fuller, Professor Esther Freeman, and Dr. Colette von Hees. I cordially welcome you all here in Berlin to our second joint pre-ERDV Satellite Symposium for Tropical Dermatology under this year's headline, Dermatologists Working in Resource-Poor Countries. Our wonderful friend and mentor, Claire Fuller, chair of the International Foundation for Dermatology, helped us tremendously to organize today's event, and even more to even realize it under economical aspects. This afternoon's Satellite Symposium was generally sponsored by the International League of Dermatological Societies. So my sincere and heartfelt gratitude today goes to ILDS President Professor Lim, to ILDS Executive Director Mrs. Apita Bose, to ILDS Head of Operations Mrs. Emma van Rooyen, and ILDS Programs Coordinator Becca Garrett, and to ILDS Treasurer Professor Stephen Schumack. Thank you all for this great support. Regarding our exceptional location here, the Hollywood Media Hotel, I promise you now a glamorous afternoon with you all as our important and highly regarded guests, with Oscar-worthy speakers, and with some hopefully appetizing food. So it appears to be quite similar to the Academy Awards ceremony, the night of the Oscars, just without Oscars, and just, of course, without any slaps in the face. Thank you all for listening, and enjoy the following hours with us, with wonderful colleagues and friends, all sharing the same passion for tropical dermatology. It was expected that Professor Lim would speak now a few words, but we will do this later. And on behalf of the IFD and of GLODEM, I would ask now you, Claire, just to speak a few words to us. Thank you.
I'd just like to welcome you all and echo that welcome, and particularly to our online community. I think we have about 100. I'm looking over to our assistants, 100. And so we kind of want to include you as best as we can. So we're going to work out quite how to do that as we go along. So as with most GLODERM meetings, the EADV task force is much more organized, but this is what we had when we started, a Sharpie and some paper labels which we stuck on. We don't get much more technical than that. We're very coping with resource limited settings, so you know we can be resilient and innovative. So that's what we're going to seek for this afternoon. I'm particularly pleased to welcome Norman here today. He tells me that his first international meeting was in Berlin at the ILDS World Congress in 1987, I think. And it is a wonderful opportunity for him to return to Berlin to this extremely important session this afternoon. So I think you are our most welcome guest there, Norman. Thank you for coming. And that's really all I want to say. I would just like to get the meeting going, really. And this is all going to be fantastic. We've got a superb program. We look forward to learning lots. Thank you.
So I take pride now in announcing and introducing our first speaker this afternoon, Dr.subani Perera, a young qualified dermatologist from Colombo in Sri Lanka, who is actually working for 1 year as a guest doctor at the dermatological department of the University of Rostock, which is in northeast Germany, located at the seashores of the Baltic Sea. Head of this department is Professor Dr. Stefan Emmert, and supervising consultant is Dr. Rüdiger Panzer. At the end of next month, Subani will leave Germany to be back home again, reunited with your family. It was in Colombo, Sri Lanka in 1918 when I met Subani first. I was lecturer at that time at the Postgraduate Medical Center, and Subani was one of my young doctors who was listening. Today, it will be the other way around. I got to know Subani as a wonderful person and an uprising star in dermatology with great knowledge in many dermatological fields. She started as a resident house officer in transfusion medicine at the National Hospital of Sri Lanka in Colombo, which a period as an intern house officer in surgery and medicine, right? Okay. Then she worked as a medical officer in histopathology at the National Cancer Institute in Maharangama, Sri Lanka, and followed by a period as a registrar in dermatology at the National Hospital. As a senior registrar in dermatology, she worked at the Lady Ridgway's Hospital for Children under the supervision of our well-known friend, Professor Jayamini Seneviratne. This was accomplished by 3 months as an acting consultant dermatologist at the base hospital Udugama in Sri Lanka before she left her country in November 22 for a year in Germany. Subani speaks not only Sinhalese and English, her German was already good when she arrived here and got nearly perfect to date. Today, Subani will speak in English about a fascinating characteristic of Sri Lankan leishmaniasis, a peculiarity which is unique in the world, unique as you, Subani. The stage is yours.
Good afternoon to all of you. Please let me start off by thanking for that very kind introduction by Dr. Andreas Montag, and thanking the EADV task force for giving me this opportunity to unfold the story of leishmaniasis in Sri Lanka. So, this is a short overview of my topic. And leishmaniasis, it's a vector-borne parasitic disease, a zoonosis, and the vector is the female sandfly, who belongs to the phlebotomous species in case of Sri Lanka. And the parasite is a protozoa of the genus Leishmania. And there are several distinctive clinical syndromes that are recognized, namely the cutaneous, mucocutaneous, and the visceral forms. So I would be mainly focusing about the vector and the parasite in the setting of Sri Lanka. The vector in Sri Lanka is Phlebotomus argentipes, and this is a very small fly, and the disease is transmitted during the blood meals of this fly. The characteristic of the bite is it's a painless bite. The painlessness is mainly due to the extreme small size, like it's 5 millimeters in size, even smaller than a mosquito. And if you look at the picture, it has a very hairy body. So this hairy texture also makes it unrecognizable, this bite unrecognizable. And also this is a very weak biter, because this insect is not so accustomed to sucking blood, because this blood sucking occurs only for the maturation of eggs of the female sandfly. So only at a very particular part of their life. So they are not very specialized bloodsuckers. And their breeding happens in soil, and in soil rich in organic matter. And also they are very weak flyers. For that matter, they are found in very low altitude areas. If you look at the life cycle of the Leishmania parasite, it exists in 2 forms, the promastigote form and the amastigote form. The promastigote form is a flagellated form that is found in the sandfly. And when during a blood meal, it is transferred to the mammal, it becomes the unflagellated amastigote form. So the specific parasite that is found in Sri Lanka is Leishmania donovani MON37. This MON37 is a zymodeme, and later in my talk, I would come to explain the significance of this zymodeme. If we look at the map of Sri Lanka, yes, The areas of highest prevalence, highest endemicity are marked in red, which are the north central and the southern provinces of the country. And also it is remarkable now that the surrounding neighboring areas of these high endemicity areas are also now facing the threat of disseminated disease progressively. And if we look at the characteristics of these high endemicity areas, there are certain features that are very notable. For instance, they are mostly woody areas that are in close proximity to human habitation. As a tropical country, Sri Lanka is subject to year-round sunshine and year-round greenery, making it a very attractive environment for the insects, for any sort of survival. So insects really love this sort of areas, and especially the high humidity that is prevalent across the country. And also, if you look at the home yards of the typical Sri Lankan setup, there are shrubby cultivations like banana bushes, which form a very attractive resting place for the sandflies. So for these reasons, the vector finds Sri Lanka a very attractive and nice place to base in. Also, the typical areas that are affected are low altitude areas, generally less than 100 meters in altitude. And of course, there is overcrowding and poor sanitary practices observed as well. And when we look at the incidence of the disease, how it has evolved over time, leishmania was considered an imported case in the few cases that were reported before 1992. And the first autochthonous case reported was considered to be in 1992. And since then, the incidence has been very low and stable, but the characteristic outbreak can be observed around 2008-2009 time period. So there are several reasons behind this outbreak. This is the time period where the war situation in Sri Lanka peaked, as well as the reconciliation process took place following that. So this was the time when the army troops were really advancing through the forest areas. So one reason for this outbreak is actually inhabitation of previously uninhabited forest areas, especially by the military troops. And we came across so many army soldiers with cutaneous leishmaniasis, so much so, in fact, it became an occupational dermatosis among the military. And also the northern part of the country was not accessible for traveling, for the people, for free traveling. There was regained freedom for traveling, and so people were traveling to the northern parts of the island more. And also there was migration and dispersion of the war captives who were harboring disease from the northern part of the country to the southern parts, which actually led to an expansion of the reservoir pool of the disease as well. So moving on to the clinical presentations, the nodulo-ulcerative type is the commonest clinical manifestation we observe, usually a solitary nodule with dry ulceration. Occasionally, we observe a perilesional halo and some satellite lesions, but generally it's a solitary lesion, but quite rarely also the sporotrichoid spread or multiple lesions along the lymphatic drainage can also be observed. Another form of presentation is the non-healing chronic ulcer, which is a wet ulcer. So there are evidence to suggest that the form of the ulcer, the dry versus the wetness of the ulcer, depends on the host immune status. This is another form, the lupoid form, which clinically mimics lupus vulgaris. And another peculiar type is the Chiclerose ulcer, or the leishmaniasis presenting as a non-healing ulcer involving the ear. The name Chiclero is derived from the Chicleros, or the people who used to climb the chicle trees to collect the sap. The sap of the chicle trees were used as chewing gum. And these people were Chicleros from Mexico, and they presented with non-healing ulcers of their ears because they were used to be in these forest areas for prolonged period of times and were subject to bites by sandflies. So that's how the name Chiclerose ulcer was derived. Rosacea-like a presentation is another a seldom observed type, and Leishmania recidivans is when the cutaneous leishmaniasis was diagnosed and treated adequately, and which stayed in remission for long periods of time and suddenly coming with eruptive papules and nodules of the same lesion. Another feature observed is the cutaneous leishmaniasis presenting with photodermatitis. This is considered to be a hypersensitivity reaction to the antigens of the parasite, leading to an id-type reaction in the photoexposed areas. This is another example for the same. I would now move on to the comparison of Sri Lankan leishmaniasis with the global scenario. When we look at the world map, Sri Lanka is marked by the arrow, and we are an endemic country for cutaneous leishmaniasis. And the parasite that causes visceral leishmaniasis is Leishmania donovani. And we have Leishmania donovani in Sri Lanka. But surprisingly, when we consider visceral leishmaniasis, Sri Lanka seems to be spared, at least for now. So this brings us to the question why visceral leishmaniasis is not seen in Sri Lanka in spite of having the same vector and the same parasite causing visceral leishmaniasis. So Professor Nadira Karunavira from the Faculty of Medicine, University of Colombo, and a team led by her have done extensive research on this matter, and she has published this report, and they have found that the cymodeme of Leishmania donovani causing Leishmania in Sri Lanka is MON37, whereas the cymodeme in India is MON2. A cymodeme is an enzymatic signature of the parasite, an enzyme the parasite produces. So there is a difference between the two strains just because of this enzyme. However, the sequence analysis of this enzyme has demonstrated a single amino acid change and a single nucleotide difference. So this is relieving in one hand, but also alarming on the other. As we know, the microorganisms are notorious for acquiring mutations. So with the amount of reservoirs of Leishmania donovani we have in Sri Lanka, the occurrence of a genetic mutation will be disastrous. This can be actually explained by the few sporadic cases of visceral leishmaniasis that did occur in Sri Lanka, around 3 cases, and 1 case of mucocutaneous leishmaniasis, which are thought to be genetically mutant species. And also, in these studies, they have extensively studied about the dermatrophism of the Leishmania donovani in Sri Lanka, and they have actually done a long-term follow-up of patients to see if there was a visceralizing potential, but to find there was no visceralizing potential of this cymodeme. And also, the other peculiar observation was using a mouse model that the cutaneous leishmaniasis, in fact, acted as a protective factor against visceralization in the lab mice. So, how we make the diagnosis is the clinical diagnosis is suggested by an asymptomatic, non-healing, ulcerated nodule in most cases, and in the exposed areas of the body, and a history of travel to an endemic area. This can be supported with a slit skin smear stained with GEMSA to demonstrate the amastigotes. Also, cultures can be done with lesional aspirates, and a skin biopsy will show granulomatous inflammation with a mixed infiltrate and a dot and dash appearance. Serology becomes useful in case of mucocutaneous or visceral disease. So this is a slit skin smear, and the amastigotes are seen inside a macrophage. This is the histopathology. Generally, there is a very dense dermal inflammation, and the dot and dash appearance is the characteristic feature. Sometimes it's not easily evident. A GEMSA stain has to be performed. So management, we have locally made guidelines for the management of leishmaniasis by the Sri Lanka College of Dermatologists, by a guideline committee. And the management goals are to increase public awareness, vector repellent and bite prevention measures, and lesion treatment. The treatment of lesions is achieved with intralesional or intramuscular sodium stibogluconate, which is the standard, and at-home local thermotherapy, topical paramomycin. However, cryotherapy, though once used, is less favored due to the potential of hibernation of the parasite. And this is a series showing the effect of intralesional sodium stibogluconate infiltration. 2 to 5, 1 weekly apart, 2 to 5 sessions are generally required. And this is a method which was invented by Professor Jayamini Seneviratne, a team led by him. This is a very versatile at-home therapy where the spoon is led to come to a temperature of around 55 to 60, and a series of treatment at home. I will present one case. There is a very bad looking ulcer which has granulated, and finally this is the final results. So I would like to acknowledge my teachers, Professor Jayamini Seneviratne, Dr. Shriyani Samaravira, and Professor Nadira Karunavira, not only for their guidance, but for their massive scientific contribution with regard to leishmaniasis in Sri Lanka. And thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Subani. And for the interest of time, we'll hold your questions until the end if we have time. And I'm going to hand over to Colette to introduce our next speaker.
Thank you, Claire. I'd like to introduce Marloes Grijze. She's a Dutch dermatologist who's a postdoc research fellow at Oxford Clinical Research Unit in Indonesia with a focus on skin entity research. She was a former Glodder mentee, and she received a very prestigious award, the L'Oreal Social Responsibility Award. I know her as someone with an incredible drive and energy to improve the lives of patients in resource-poor settings. And she does that through a combination of field and clinical care and finding innovative ways to support the dermatological care for these patients. She's actually in Timor right now in the field, so she is not here to present, but she pre-recorded her talk, and she will be available for questioning later. So this is Marloes. Over to you.
Good afternoon from Indonesia. My name is Marloes Grijze and I'm a dermatologist and postdoc research fellow with the Oxford University Clinical Research Unit in Indonesia. Thank you for the invitation to present my work on improving access to skin care in Eastern Indonesia. I'm very happy to be with you here today, albeit online. I have no conflict of interest to report. Indonesia is not just any country, it's a special place. The country is not only the fourth most populous country in the world and the biggest archipelago with 17,000 islands that stretch over more than 5,000 kilometers, it is also the country where I grew up and treasure many memories. Our adventure, this time with my own family, began in December 2017 when we left with the four of us from Amsterdam to Jakarta. In the past 5 years, I've been leading a growing research agenda on neglected skin diseases in the eastern part of Indonesia that includes community engagement activities. In the following 15 minutes, I would like to share with you some of our ongoing work related to teledermatology and surveillance studies in Sumba and a clinical drug trial in Sulawesi and Papua.